The Grand Canyon had always been a monument to geological time, stretching across millions of years, its exposed strata revealing a record of Earth's long, silent history. But deep beneath those crimson ridges and sun-baked cliffs, something was recently uncovered that shattered the boundaries of science and human understanding. While a wildfire called Dragon Bravo raged across the North Rim, forcing mass evacuations and consuming the historic North Rim Lodge, another, far more secretive fire was igniting within the scientific community. What began as a standard geological survey ended with a terrifying revelation buried almost 1.6 kilometers or a full mile beneath the surface. The original intent of the expedition was mundane. A joint team of international researchers comprised of geologists, archaeologists, and seismologists had deployed advanced ground-penetrating radar across the Colorado Plateau to better understand the seismic architecture of the region. The area's ancient rock formations, long the subject of academic fascination, had already been studied for their nearly 2-billion-year-old geological record. But this particular scan revealed an anomaly no one was prepared for: a symmetrical void far too large and far too regular to be natural. Initially dismissed as a possible flaw in the radar data, the formation's consistent geometry quickly ruled out error. Analysis revealed internal patterns, grids, chambers, corridors, hidden within the void. The shapes were clearly artificial, as though some forgotten intelligence had etched precision into the very crust of the Earth. Months of deliberation followed before excavation even began. What was finally unearthed beneath the surface was not a simple cavern, but an immense, interlinked, subterranean complex unlike anything found in recorded history. The architecture within the newly exposed chamber seemed far removed from any known prehistoric style. Gigantic, monolithic pillars stood upright like guardians, each etched with alien-looking symbols that defied linguistic classification. Though constructed from unfamiliar stone, the surfaces bore the hallmarks of mathematical perfection. Arches curved with impossible smoothness. Walls formed angles and ratios only seen in modern computational design. The level of craftsmanship suggested either technologies unknown to history or a civilization with a command of engineering entirely incompatible with everything currently taught about North American prehistory. No human artifacts were found. No bones, no tools, no pottery fragments. The builders, whoever or whatever they were, had vanished without a trace. And yet, the surrounding sediment placed the structure's origins at approximately 50,000 years ago, tens of thousands of years before any known culture had the capacity for such feats. Things grew stranger still. In one of the deeper segments of the chamber, metallic vaults were discovered. Each appeared to be sealed by some kind of advanced contract mechanism. The material composing these vaults was impervious to drilling, heat, or chemical erosion. Scientists tried lasers, plasma cutters, and cryogenic treatments. Nothing left so much as a scratch. Even more troubling were the electromagnetic pulses emitted by the vaults. Steady, rhythmic, and incredibly faint, but unmistakably structured. Some scientists likened them to a heartbeat, others to a language. With each passing week, it became increasingly difficult to rationalize the site within conventional frameworks. Linguists and artificial intelligence programs attempted to decipher the symbols, only to discover that the markings resisted translation. They weren't phonetic, they weren't pictorial. Instead, they seemed to operate on a level akin to mathematics, multi-dimensional in form, recursive in structure, and most unsettling of all, constantly shifting in meaning depending on the angle or light from which they were viewed. Additional chambers were mapped, revealing miles of connected tunnels beneath the canyon floor. Some paths branched out and terminated in unstable pockets where magnetic field intensity would spike without warning. Instruments malfunctioned in these areas. Compasses spun uselessly. Even hardened researchers reported feelings of vertigo, nausea, and disorientation. One geologist emerged from such a corridor speaking of mechanical hums and visions of towering machines moving behind translucent walls. Radiation monitors, later placed in these same passageways, registered unexplained surges, pulses that mirrored waveforms typically found in deep space emissions. Such phenomena drew comparisons to the more controversial claims of ancient alien theorists, long dismissed by mainstream science. But this time, the evidence couldn't be waved away. The chamber was real. The material science was impossible. The signals were measurable. Every data point strained the limits of modern understanding. Some researchers began to suspect the site had never been intended to be found. One theory suggested the structure was built not to commemorate or preserve, but to quarantine. Perhaps it was meant to imprison something. Or perhaps it was a containment field, meant to isolate the rest of the world from whatever pulsed silently within those vaults. It was a suggestion that brought more than unease. It brought dread. Adding to the growing sense of alarm was a strange mural uncovered along one of the more isolated passage walls. The depiction showed dozens of abstract figures surrounding a central orb with radiant lines spiraling outward. Some interpreted it as a celestial map. Others called it a warning. The surrounding figures were shown to be decaying, disintegrating, caught in some process of violent dissolution. One cryptographer remarked that it looked like a record of destruction, not by weapon or fire, but by proximity to something uncontainable. Parallel to the scientific frenzy was a growing divide within the global community. Some nations demanded the site be sealed immediately. Others wanted full transparency. A third group, the most secretive, pushed for strategic exploitation. The technology buried in the canyon could, if properly unlocked, surpass anything known in modern defense science. And it was during this period of internal tension that the structure began to change. Scientists noticed a gradual warming along the outer surface of the vaults. Not enough to burn, but enough to measure. These thermal fluctuations appeared to coincide with human proximity and electromagnetic scans. The assumption emerged that the structure wasn't just reacting, it was awakening. One chamber, far more isolated than the rest, was discovered in the final weeks of the first excavation wave. It was unlike any other part of the complex, perfectly circular, seamless, and composed of a mirror-like substance that consumed light instead of reflecting it. The space immediately caused anomalies in timekeeping devices. Stopwatches lost synchronization. Instruments registered time dilation. Within minutes, atomic clocks inside the chamber fell behind those left outside by fractions of a second. The effect was small, but consistent. Repeated experiments confirmed it. Something inside the room was bending time. At the room center stood a ring of dark panels, arranged like an interface, though none of them activated. Upon closer examination, researchers discovered fingerprints, or something like them, left in dustless clarity across the surfaces. The patterns were unfamiliar. Longer than human hands, their ridges didn't spiral like fingerprints, but instead formed angular shapes, reminiscent of symbolic logic or biodigital imprinting. They weren't simply marks of contact. They were messages encoded in pressure and geometry. The team barely had time to grasp the implications before the deeper levels revealed an even more shocking display. Beyond the central circular chamber, auxiliary tunnels led deeper still, revealing galleries that defied all natural explanation. In one corridor, a series of translucent cases stood undisturbed by time, preserving what appeared to be humanoid specimens, biological forms suspended in some petrified state. They resembled humans only distantly. Their limbs were elongated, with unnaturally flexible joints. Their cranial structures bulged upward in asymmetrical curves, and their spinal columns held more vertebrae than any known hominid. DNA sampling was impossible without risking contamination, but the anatomical features alone fueled an avalanche of new theories. Some researchers speculated these were a different species altogether. Others believed them to be modified forms of early humans, perhaps genetic experiments conducted by the architects of the structure. If this theory held weight, it would suggest the unthinkable, that human evolution may not have been entirely organic, that there may have been external influence, an intelligence with the capability to engineer life, and perhaps even direct the trajectory of an entire species. As disturbing as the biological findings were, they were soon eclipsed by the emergence of vibrational pulses emanating from deeper within the structure. These pulses began shortly after one of the vaults was subjected to a synchronized, high-frequency sonar burst during routine testing. The response was subtle at first, tremors too small to register on most instruments. But within hours, a harmonic pulse, repeating every 108 seconds, began to ripple outward, from the deepest node of the complex. The pattern wasn't random. It mirrored waveforms typically found in resonant acoustic systems, similar to those observed in deep Earth or interstellar oscillations. Seismographs as far as 800 kilometers away began picking up the tremors. Researchers exposed to the pulses for extended periods began reporting vivid dreams, lucid hallucinations, and altered perceptions. More disturbingly, some described identical visions. Floating cities made of metallic light, a dark sphere orbiting a shattered crystalline world, and a sense of being watched from above by a silent, ancient force. Neuroscientists brought in to study the phenomenon found that the pulse frequencies closely aligned with the brain's theta and delta waves, frequencies associated with sleep, trance states, and deep meditation. In controlled settings, volunteers exposed to recordings of the signal reported identical psychological effects: a dissociation from time, disorienting clarity of memory, and a profound emotional response to abstract stimuli. Meanwhile, an even deeper chamber was discovered beneath the lowest levels of the mapped system. This one was unlike the others. Not architectural, but seemingly organic in layout, as though it had grown rather than been built. At its center, encased in a shell of crystalline material denser than diamond, floated an object unlike any known to science. Constantly shifting in shape and texture, this form radiated a faint but complex energy field, one that absorbed directed light and deflected all scanning techniques. The energy surrounding it bent space. Laser beams aimed at it curved unnaturally and vanished without scattering. Spectroscopy yielded no usable data. The object appeared to exist in a semi-stable state, neither fully matter nor energy, neither conscious nor inert. Proximity to this sphere caused acute psychological effects. Several personnel collapsed after only minutes inside the chamber. Their accounts were fragmented, emotional, haunted by sensations of overwhelming presence, as if something cold and limitless had pressed against their thoughts. One researcher described it as being noticed by something that has forgotten what mercy feels like. Outside the chamber, markings etched into the walls aligned precisely with celestial coordinates, ones not seen from Earth in over 30,000 years. These weren't merely decorative. They tracked precession cycles, planetary nodal shifts, and stellar movements with mathematical accuracy. Some researchers speculated that the entire structure operated on a stellar clock, and that the awakening may not be incidental at all. It might be synchronized with a return. As atmospheric anomalies began appearing above the canyon, ring-like distortions formed in the ionosphere, concentric patterns of electromagnetic charge invisible to the human eye, but unmistakable on satellite scans. These distortions grew stronger by the day, always centered above the site, and they matched no known meteorological activity. No solar flares, no magnetic disturbances, only the pulsing structure below. What had begun as a seismic survey had grown into a planetary enigma, and yet the most harrowing revelations still lay ahead. Tensions among the scientific teams escalated as further attempts to interact with the central sphere triggered irregular energy emissions. The pulses became more intense, more frequent. Electromagnetic interference began to affect communication with the surface. Devices malfunctioned without warning. Magnetic compasses spun erratically, and even inert instruments recorded fluctuations as though the structure itself was altering the surrounding physics. It was as if the entire chamber was responding, watching, or waiting. In a last-ditch effort to understand the artifact, a multinational consortium brought in a zero-temperature containment pod to isolate the object for transport. But before the apparatus could even make contact, an event occurred that would leave the Grand Canyon's hidden corridors permanently sealed to the public. At precisely 2:03 a.m., without any preceding seismic activity, a concentric collapse occurred in the canyon floor above the structure. Thousands of tons of rock imploded inward without raising dust or causing shockwaves. The entire entry corridor was swallowed by earth, and the lower chambers vanished beneath tons of compressed stone. No personnel were harmed, but the site was effectively erased. Those who had been inside the central chamber before the collapse were placed under quarantine. Some began displaying neurological symptoms within hours. Synesthesia, dissociative episodes, and persistent auditory hallucinations in harmonic tones. MRI scans revealed unprecedented activity in the limbic system and temporal lobes. patterns resembling dream states while fully awake. Others spoke in dead languages or produced glyphs matching those carved into the chamber walls. Symbols no one had been taught, yet somehow remembered. At the same time, satellite imaging revealed faint geomagnetic echoes on 5 continents, each forming subtle spiral anomalies within ancient megalithic sites. Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, Giza, Angkor, and Göbekli Tepe. The patterns mirrored those discovered inside the Grand Canyon's buried structure. These sites, once considered isolated cultural marvels, now appeared to be part of something larger. A design. A grid. Official explanations were swift and dismissive. The collapse, they said, was due to unstable limestone. No mention was made of the crystalline sphere, the humanoid figures, or the radiating signal still faintly detectable across certain spectrums. The site was quietly declared off-limits for safety reasons. Access to surrounding airspace was restricted under the guise of a geohazard containment protocol. And those few researchers who continued to investigate the phenomenon found themselves professionally ostracized or quietly reassigned. Still, the signal persisted. Amateur radio operators across North America continued to intercept the harmonic pulse, now reduced to a faint hum, but no less rhythmic. Every 108 seconds, like a heartbeat deep within the bones of the Earth. And it wasn't just local. Reports began surfacing of similar pulses detected from deep beneath the ocean floor, near the Mariana Trench, and within the ice-locked valleys of Antarctica. Whether these were connected was uncertain. What was undeniable was this: the Earth itself seemed to be humming with a forgotten language. Those few who had seen the chamber firsthand, who had felt its unseen presence crawl into their thoughts. If this story gripped your imagination, stirred your curiosity, or left you questioning the very foundations of human history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay with us as we uncover more hidden truths, strange discoveries, and unsolved mysteries that challenge what we think we know about our world and what might lie beneath it.